Okay, hi everybody. It's been a little while since I could get back to you, unfortunately, and I still don't know whether this is working quite properly. It is my hope that it is. We we're on Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, still Section 1, Part 5, video commentary. Today is the 10th of August, and let's see if we have a little bit of a segue here. Well, I'll just read the underlined, or rather the bolded material. He says, I have earlier pointed out to you that the basic qualities for which we are looking are, and I do think we remember that these have been discussed. He's going to discuss them now in greater detail. Let's see if I can get this down here. So, yeah. They are sensitivity, impersonality, psychic capacity, and mental polarization. Upon these, I would like very briefly to enlarge, and then I will lay before you for your understanding, interest, notice the word understanding, and possible collaboration, the plans for future group activity. These plans can materialize if you make the necessary adjustments and submit yourselves to the discipline and the training, which will make greatly increased usefulness possible. Well, we certainly do see that there is no evasion of the obedience. In this case, I guess, occult obedience that is required in order to really make ourselves and our groups useful. So here we are. This is program number 23. I'm a little concerned that I'm not hearing the feedback from I'm not quite hearing the feedback the way I would like to. Well, let's just say that my usual feedback to tell me that the system is working is not here. So I'm just assuming that somehow it will work. And that's my hope. Okay, now sensitivity, impersonality, psychic capacity, and mental polarization. Now, think for a moment of every one of these on your own, just for a moment. May I note that it seems like quite a tall order to develop all of these. Let's see what Master DK says about them. He says, to begin with, I have stated that the first requirement is sensitivity. What exactly is this, he says? It does not mean primarily that you are a, quote, sensitive soul, the connotation of which usually means that you are thin-skinned. That would mean reactive, I guess. That you are thin-skinned, he says, self-centered, and always on the defensive. All right. He's certainly telling us what it is not. Okay. And I'll put that down here. Yeah. Rather, he says, rather, do I refer to the capacity whereby you are enabled to expand your consciousness so that you become aware of ever widened ranges of contact. May I say that's quite a difference, isn't it? Between being emotionally reactive, emotionally self-absorbed, and always trying to protect your present position. This is very different, right? He goes on to say, I refer to the ability to be alive, alert, keen to recognize relationships, quick to react to need, mentally, emotionally, and physically attentive to life, and rapidly developing the power to observe upon all three planes in the three worlds of evolution simultaneously. Well, indeed, it is a tall order, isn't it? We might say. It's so important, isn't it, to look at how the master uses words compared to our habitual interpretation of them. They're so often very different. Let me read that again. I refer, well, okay. Rather do I refer to the capacity whereby you are enabled to expand your consciousness so that you become aware of ever widening ranges of contact. I refer to the ability to be alive, alert, keen to recognize relationships, quick to react to the need. May I interpolate, speed seems to be something involved in this kind of sensitivity. Going on then with the master's words, mentally, emotionally, and physically attentive to life. And may I say that usually we lack full development in one of those areas of attentiveness. Going on with decay and rapidly developing the power to observe upon all three planes in the three worlds simultaneously. Let me say, he really has demonstrated this in his teaching and in his analysis of the disciples with whom he has been working. He is acutely aware, if he chooses to be, of the dynamics of their process, and therefore can write those most well, I was going to say hopeful, yes, but uplifting and helpful letters. Okay, he goes on. I am not interested in your personal relations where they concern your wrong personality sensitivity to depression. May I say that these are all glamour producing or are glamours themselves. So he says, I'm not interested in your personal relations where they concern your wrong personality sensitivity to depression, to self-pity, your defenses, your so-called sensitivity to slights. May I say, Foster Bailey, in one of his books, he said, well, we're not quite so reactive then when someone steps on our toes, you know. Okay, DK is saying, your so-called sensitivity to slights, to misunderstandings, your dislike of your environing conditions, your hurt pride, and qualities of this kind. Okay, it's really important, may I say, that we understand what sensitivity is not. He certainly does a good job contrasting what it isn't with what it is, and our usefulness depends to a great measure upon our sensitivity. He goes on to say, these all cause you bewilderment and let loose in you the floodgates of compassion for yourself. Well, may I say, one of the major causes of glamour is self-pity, or we might call it self-compassion. Why are we in the circumstances having to put up with certain conditions, physically, emotionally, mentally? We question ourselves and we protest. But he goes on to say, but you do not need me to deal with them. Of them you are well aware and can handle them if you choose. So may I say he's putting the responsibility back on us, isn't he? And saying, look, a master's attention is not necessary when to deal with such things. Now, I must say that sometimes during his letters to the students, he does point out these things. And he tries to be helpful with them, but basically he's sounding the principle here. He goes on to say that these faults are interesting only insofar as they affect the life of your group. May I say, let us never forget that he is seeking to induce a certain quality of group consciousness, and the individual member of the group and the states of consciousness of that member, especially personally considered, are of note to him if they really affect the group. I suppose all of us can think about how we are affecting our group or groups, what has been our general kind of influence according to the state of consciousness that we seem to retain. He goes on to say, they, meaning these faults, they must be handled by you with care and with the open eye that senses the danger from afar and seeks to avoid it. Well, this whole paragraph is, may I say, dealing with what sensitivity is and what it isn't. And it would be well to have what it is firmly in mind so that we can be the type of cooperative unit which he seeks to work with. And the type of unit he can help along those lines. And then the responsibility will fall to us. He goes on to say, the sensitivity which I want to see developed is alertness to soul contact, impressionability to the voice of the teacher, that's in quotes. And may I say, that teacher may be the master or maybe the soul, some higher type of entity. He goes on, and aliveness sorry, occasionally those calls, they do come through and I have to answer them. But anyway, the voice of the teacher, that can be the soul, that can be something still higher. DK is saying we must be sensitive or have an aliveness to the impact of new ideas and to the delicacy. Note that word, I will say, the delicacy. It doesn't necessarily occur in thunder. The delicacy of intuitional responsiveness. These are ever the hallmark of the true disciple. So, may I say, let us keep this requirement and the others to come firmly in mind. DK goes on to say, it is the spiritual sensitivity which must be cultivated. And this, yeah, this is only, I want to make sure that I'm actually getting you there. Okay. I don't know why it tells me my screen sharing is paused. This is one of those days, I'm afraid, that it's going to be a little difficult to get through. So looks like should be operating correctly. Okay, we seem to be back on target here. So as he says, this type of sensitivity and may I say, the qualities to come are ever the hallmark of the true disciple. He goes on, it is spiritual sensitivity which must be cultivated. This is only truly possible when you learn to work through the centers above the diaphragm and to transmute solar plexus activity, which is so dominant in the average person, and may I say, even in quite a few of us as disciples. And he goes on, turning it into heart activity and the service of your fellow men. And we know that between the first and second initiation, there is a very strong transference from the solar plexus to the heart. And I think he's speaking to a lot of people who are basically chelas in the light. Now they will be invited to be accepted disciples if they are not already so, and this will occur especially in relation to the Dyna 2 book, which I hope we can take up as it is a manual for initiation, a manual for training for initiation. So friends, let's have the Master's words really make an impression upon us, and try to do that even though I'm having a little technical difficulty today. I would like everything to be smoother, but it isn't, and I just have to accept that fact. Okay, friends, we go on. Sometimes I think it will be a miracle for this particular program to work out properly, so I have my proverbial fingers crossed on it. Now, we've looked at sensitivity. Okay, so far so good. And now we will look at impersonality. Impersonality. And he goes on to say, see, I'm thinking about the way impersonality can be misinterpreted by the first ray type. We sometimes hear the phrase cold and impersonal. But I remember a friend in the Lucis Trust when I first got there in 1980, I guess it was. And he was experienced and probably had thought about this quite a bit. And he said, what could be warmer than the loving impersonality of the Christ? Okay, that stuck with me. It's interesting, you don't know what words or actions will stick with you. But when you review your life, the lightning of thought sometimes takes you exactly to those important moments which, whether you realized it or not, at the moment, did make an impression upon you. So, anyway, impersonality, for high-grade integrated people, is peculiarly difficult to achieve. Now, why should that be? He goes on, there is a close relation between impersonality and detachment. Study this. Let me say that's simply, it's a bit like a command. It's not a command, but it's a suggestion. I've looked at the D's, so to speak: discipline, dispassion, decentralization, and finally, detachment, which is a quality of all of those three foregoing. Well, decentralization applies to the entire personality. I think I left out discrimination. Let me try again. Discipline regarding the etheric physical. Dispassion in relation to the astral body. Discrimination in relation to the mind. Then decentralization in relation to the entire personality, and finally, detachment as the great generality, which he always is encouraging us to develop. Now, if you think about Alice Bailey, who was certainly an advanced soul, certainly at a certain point, an initiate of the third degree, well on her way to the fourth. Detachment was one of her major qualities to cultivate. DRS, detachment, rest, and S, skill in action. So how detached are we really? Which means, I think, upholding a soul point of view. At least that. At least that. To slip into the consciousness of the soul, that requires contemplation and is not so easily achieved, is it really? We are, all of us, in a sense, neophytes. We're new to this. And he kind of tells us that the beginner is always more consciously conceited, assuming too much, than will be the truly experienced disciple, the not only the accepted disciple, but the chela on the thread and the chela within the aura. So let us not exaggerate that which we have achieved. Now, going on, many cherished ideas, he says, many hard-won qualities, many carefully nurtured righteousnesses, and many powerfully formulated beliefs militate against impersonality. Well, may I say we are, we've been through the wars, and we've arrived at the best we know. And it's been a struggle. And no one wants to give up so quickly, or very few beginners, that is, like us, the result of struggle. Hard won, DK says, carefully nurtured, powerfully formulated. Who wants to give those up? And if we were to be truly impersonal in the spiritual sense, we would have to stand back from these qualities and realize that, good though they may be, there's still something more important. DK goes on. It is hard for the disciple during the process of his early training, note that, early training, to hold earnestly to his own ideals and to pursue forcefully his own spiritual integration, and yet remain impersonally oriented towards other people. Well, think about that for a minute. He's not saying we should not hold earnestly to our own ideals, at least in some measure, or to forcefully pursue our spiritual integration. But there is something more. There is something better, something higher. Well, this is the thorny road or path of occultism, and many a hard lesson has come to us and also awaits us. Going on with DK, he seeks recognition of his struggle and achievement. He longs to have the light which he has kindled draw forth a reaction from others. He wants to be known as a disciple. May I say that sounds like DK really knows about this, that he's been through it, and therefore can speak with authority. The words he uses, he goes on, he aches to show his power and his highly developed love nature, so that he may evoke admiration, or at least challenge. Well, okay. This is the condition of that highly integrated individuality who is on the path of discipleship, but he wants something for the personal self. Now that is the issue. Somewhere, and maybe in a number of places, we're told to ask nothing for the personal self. Let's read again what he wants, according to DK. He seeks recognition for his struggle and achievement. It does it not show that his motives are not quite where they have to be? I might note. Then going on with DK, he longs to have the light which he has kindled, noting indeed he has worked on it, He longs to have the light which he has kindled draw forth a reaction from others. He wants to be known as a disciple. Now, isn't that, may I say, simply a matter of pride in a way? And in a way trying to stand out as a personality or as an individuality from others. Again, not quite where he needs to be. DK goes on, he aches to show his power and his highly developed love nature. But may I say, he's still split until he simply loves without desiring to show the love nature. He's a bit of a house divided against itself. So, repeating, he aches to show his power and his highly developed love nature so that he may evoke admiration. What is that? Noting the good opinion of others to be held in a positive light by others, and of course the rewards of those warm and uplifting waves, which feel very good, often, unless you catch yourself doing what you're really doing. So DK says he aches to show his power and his highly developed love nature so that he may evoke admiration or at least a challenge. I think it has been acted upon by some who are not really very selfless, that some kind of news reports about them are certainly better than being ignored. But, okay, DK goes on. Nothing happens. He is looked upon as no better than all the rest of his brothers. And then life, therefore, proves dissatisfying. Well, may I add, compared to what he wants deep down, what he's getting is not really what he wants. So we do have to test ourselves. How much are we looking for the admiration of others, some sort of recognition, some sort of positive waves that are directed to our person, some, what can I say, emphasis of the person, of the individual, when in fact we are to forget the little self and concentrate on the plan, because the work needs us. But any little motive that is not in line with this larger reinforcement of the group is going to eventually be pointed out or discovered. What does it say? The road is traveled in the full light of day, thrown upon the path by those who know and lead. Naught can then be hidden. Note, naught can then be hidden, and at each turn, a man must face himself. This is I think that's the very first of the 6 statements having to do with the rules of the road. Okay. Now, DK goes on. These truths of self-analysis are seldom definitely faced or formulated by any of you. And let's remember that he's speaking to those, by and large, for the most part, have taken the first initiation, and a number of whom are already accepted disciples. So, repeating what he says, these truths of self-analysis are seldom definitely faced or formulated by any of you, and therefore, because I seek to help you, I formulate them for you and face you with them. Well, that's something the Master can do, isn't it? Because he does see. He sees what the average disciple is overlooking, and what the average disciple is evading. I wonder if we paused, how much evasion of factual seeing we would detect in ourselves. Well, that's something to really face ourselves with. It can't be done in one moment or overnight, so to speak. This whole idea of facing the truth about ourselves and not evading what we should be seeing is very important upon the path of discipleship. How else are we to be really useful and somehow not a liability? Okay, DK goes on. It is hard for intelligent men and women to see others closely associated with them dealing with life and problems from a totally different angle to their own, handling them in a weak or stupid way from the angle of the disciple, and making apparently serious errors in judgment or technique. Well, think about it. Aren't we always ready to correct the mistakes of others? the tendency to leave them to their own soul is oftentimes less pronounced than the tendency to step in and say, well, if you would only do it this way, you would be much more successful. But that doesn't seem to work, does it? They will defend their point of view and usually persist. So DK faces us with a question. Yet, brother of old, why are you so sure that you are right and that your point of view is necessarily correct? And I would add, probably because of familiarity with that point of view. It having been that upon which we have concentrated for a long time. So we don't really bother to see the virtues, possible virtues, in our brother's point of view. DK goes on, it may be that your slant on life, and may I say that means bias, that's what a slant in life is, a bias, a tendency to perceive in a certain way or roll down a certain hill on the incline. He says, why are you so sure that you are right and your point of view is necessarily correct? Well, obviously it may be, but he's talking about an attitude where the disciple is convinced that his own slant on life is correct. DK goes on, it may be that your slant on life and your interpretation of a situation needs readjustment, and that your motives and attitudes could be more elevated or purer. I might add that he's probably talking about mixed motives here, and it's difficult to have what Christ calls the single eye, which is not weakened by the mixture of motives that don't really abide with each other. And DK goes on here and says about the motives, I guess, and even if they are for you the highest and the best that you can achieve at any given time, then pursue your way and leave your brother to pursue his. And then a quote, better a man's own dharma than the dharma of another. And may I add, even if one can succeed better at that dharma of another than the other individual seems to be succeeding. We all have our own issues to work through, and it's just a waste of time to try to take on the dharma of another. DK goes on to say, thus does the Bhagavad Gita express this truth. And then, may I say, the pointed words from DK, telling the disciple to mind his own business. It sounds like a little bit of the intervention of the first ray, mind and personality, of Alice Bailey. Telling the disciple to mind his own business. Disciples are fairly mature from the spiritual point of view and are up to the requirement that they mind their own business. They are the best one to deal with their own issues of karma and the dharmic indications of their life. DK goes on to say, this attitude of non-interference and the refusal to criticize in no way prevents service to each other or constructive group relations. May I add, DK oftentimes had certain students write to each other and correspond with each other because he knew that doing so might or would be helpful to one or both. So he goes on to say, it does not negate the expression of love or happy group cooperation. I'll interpolate here that it has been said that Alice Bailey was a cheerful person and happy, and knew when to make light of things. This is the general report about her. Thus, DK goes on, there is ever much opportunity for the practice of impersonality in all group relations. Well, that's a new little section in a way, so what I'll do there is pause for a moment and start a new little section. There is ever, he says, much opportunity for the practice of impersonality in all group relations. May I say then, it looks like he's going to give an example. So going on with him, in every group there is usually one group member and perhaps several who constitute a problem to themselves and to their group brothers. Perhaps, well, may I add, he's not letting us off the hook so easily. He wants us to think that even we can be that person. So he says, perhaps you yourself are such an one and know it not. Perhaps you know who among your co-servers provides a testing for his fellows. Perhaps you can see clearly what is in the group weakness and who it is that is keeping the group back from finer activity. Well, I think I may add that DK is going to tell us that all this may be well and good, but it's no excuse for, let's say, interference and for criticism. I've told you the story about I was in a doctor's office, I think, long ago, I was quite tired and I closed my eyes in the waiting room, and next thing I knew, some overly zealous young woman was poking me with the accusation that I was meditating. Well, I wasn't really meditating. I was just taking a little bit of a rest, but I looked at the example of what interference can really be like out of the blue. I didn't know her. She knew me, but she knew that I was committing some kind of sin against, I think, her rather narrow Christian ideals. It's one of those moments that seems insignificant, and you don't think you'll remember it, except when it comes up to the glamour of interference, a six-ray glamour. There it is. It happened, and it taught me a little lesson. So anyway, maybe we do see clearly what is the group weakness and who it is that is keeping the group back from finer activity. Maybe we see this. And then DK goes on to say, well, that is well and good, provided that you continue to love and serve and to refrain from criticism. Now let's remember again that criticism is the third major cause of glamour, along with self-pity and suspicion. DK goes on to say, it is wrong. It is a wrong attitude to seek assiduously to straighten out your brother, to chide him, or seek to impose your will upon him or your point of view. Though it is always legitimate to express ideas and to make suggestion. And may I say, telling the difference between the expression of ideas and the possible helpful suggestions on the one hand, and trying to straighten out your brother through criticism on the other hand, is that these two are significantly different. And we have to make sure we don't fall into the trap of this glamour of interference, which negates impersonality. Groups of disciples, DK says, are groups of free and independent souls who submerge their personal interests in service and who seek that inner linking which will fuse the group into an instrument for the service of humanity and of the hierarchy. Then the punchline, of course, continue with your own soul discipline and leave your brothers to continue theirs. I guess he would tell us how dangerous it is to take the seat of the superior person where we are in a position to not only advise, but to criticize and correct. And I imagine that quite a few group projects have gone astray because of this tendency, which seems so very rampant in the consciousness of certain disciples. Okay, so that's number 2 there, impersonality, and I'll just boost this up a bit. This is about sensitivity. Two major requirements to be explained from the esoteric point of view and to be absorbed by us from the esoteric point of view. Let me say that we have to make sure that our interpretations are esoteric in nature. Now comes the question of psychic powers. That is the third of the qualities that he's looking for in those he wants to work with. And he says, the question of psychic powers is not so easy to explain. I do not refer to the lower psychic powers, which may or may not develop as time goes on and need for them arises. Note the word need. Anything can be used for the good, even the often glamour-producing presence of the lower psychic powers. So, in fact, again, always, we have to try to understand in his own language what he's looking for. Otherwise, we will be in no position to cultivate the requirements. My friends, it is hard work over many years to see what has to be cultivated. That's hard enough, I think. That kind of self-analysis which forces us to face ourselves, but then to actually do it. That's even harder. So DK goes on by talking about certain capacities which he is likening to or naming as the psychic powers which have to be cultivated. And he says, I refer to the following capacities inherent in the soul, which must be developed in all of you if you are to do your share in meeting world need and work for the hierarchy in the field of world service. notice this statement about working for the hierarchy, for and with. We all think perhaps that we are quite useful, but at one point Master DK says, what makes you so sure that you are really useful? I'm not sure where he said that, but it did strike me when considering the attitude we so often adopt that, yes, we're really useful servers. Well, then the master comes back and says, what makes you so sure you're really useful? I remember my intake interview with Mary Bailey back in 1980, which was 40 years ago, plus 41 years ago. And, she asked me why I'm here and all that. And maybe I happened to say the right thing. I said, well, I wanted it to be useful. And she told me that Foster Bailey always had that attitude and said, at least let me be useful. And I might add, and not delude myself into thinking that I am useful when really I am not particularly useful. There's so much here, isn't there, about being honest with oneself and not exaggerating one's importance and not trying to claim anything for oneself. Claim making, well, it may attract attention to the self, whether it is done out loud or done in subtle ways or even simply thought about, but again, it doesn't really lead anywhere, at least not to the results that the master hopes. So, all right, these powers, psychic powers, really higher psychic powers, what does DK consider them to be? And the very first thing, intuitional response to ideas. Well, we know that on the Buddhic plane, true ideas really begin to originate, and that even high thoughts are not the same as those living entities that we call ideas. They are alive, and from a certain point of view, all of us are ideas. We are ideas in the mind of the transcendental, supra-universal deity, beyond any universe. But we're not going so far. We just have to have, what did he call it? That delicate response to ideas, to the faculty, the capacity of the intuition. And next, sensitiveness to the impression which some member of the hierarchy may seek to make upon the mind of the disciple. It is for this reason that I am training you to utilize the full moon contact. And I might add that what he's saying is that at that time, the possibility of this impression is pronounced more so than at other times during the month, except maybe the new moon, which has its own kind of impression. These are psychic powers, and they are to be cultivated. So, intuitional response to ideas, sensitiveness to the impression, which some hierarchical member is attempting to make in relation to the mind, your mind, my mind, the mind of the disciple, and then maybe an unusual one, quick response to real need. You had not, he says, regarded this as one of the psychic powers, my brother, had you? I refer not here to a solar plexus reaction, but to heart knowledge. And then we are to ponder on this distinction. See, that's what I mean by the unexpected coming through Master DK's instruction. Is it simply, oh, pity, I feel sorry for you? Or is there a real understanding, a heart understanding of the need, and a going forth with what capacities one has to meet that need? Well, there's quite a few of these psychic powers, are there not? Number 4, right observation of reality upon the soul plane. Well, maybe we can see something in the personality, but do we see the soul of another? Can we really relate to the other as a soul, soul to soul, in the one soul? Now, DK says this leads to right mental perception, to freedom from illusion and glamour, and to the illumination of the brain. Is it not a different way of looking at things from the plane of soul, from that lighted world of love, that world of sacrificial will and intention, that world of the commencement of synthesis? It kind of reminds one also of the function of the second C group members, the trained observers. And it is my impression that when the true observer is found, it will be found to be actually the monad itself. And also, number 5, correct manipulation of force, involving, therefore, an understanding of the types and qualities of force and their right creative weaving. Note that phrase. It's a very third-rate phrase. Repeating, and their right creative weaving into service upon the outer plane. Well, when we deal with planets and rays and the qualities of solar logoi and so forth, we can see how important that may be. We've almost got kind of a 1, 2, 3 here. The first one is point number 3, real action. The second point, number 4, true observation. And number 5 is the third, the manipulator. DK has told us that there are 3 types, major types of monad: the director, the teacher, and the manipulator. Or we can, if we don't like that word particularly, we can talk about the weaver, or the creative one. Okay. Now, what are we looking at here? Capacities inherent in the soul. If all of us are to meet the world need, do our share in meeting that world need, and to work for the hierarchy in the field of world service. Finally, number 6, that's a long paragraph, and then a series of questions really begins. So number 6, a true comprehension of the time element, whether it is real or not real. In the world of Maya, time is very real, or pertains to everything happening in the world of Maya. So repeating what DK says, a true comprehension of the time element with its cyclic ebb and flow, and the right seasons for action, when to act and when to refrain from acting. And DK goes on to say, a most difficult psychic power to master, my brothers, and one which can be mastered through the use of patient waiting and the elimination of hurry. So I'm reminded of the book Siddhartha. Maybe in a way, he was the considered like Gautama or Gautama, the vessel of the Buddha, or at least one who learned deeply from the Buddha's teaching. I can think, I can wait, I can fast. These were his achievements, and he used them when at last he began to achieve real success in the world. I can think. Well, can we? I can think, I can wait. And that's that element of patience. I can fast. Okay. So what I'll do here is simply put these in a distinctive color, dividing one thing from another. Intuitional response to ideas. Sensitivity to the hierarchy or some member of the hierarchy. Quick response to real need. But then it's the heart understanding that has to discover what is real need. Right observation of reality upon the soul plane, which we have somehow reached in our meditation. He tells us about successful meditation taking place within the causal body or egoic lotus. Correct manipulation of force. And we realize that DK is such an expert in these, which is what makes me think that he has that third ray monadic energy, even if his ultimate monad, as revealed upon the logoic plane, is perhaps the second ray, which would be the teaching ray. So observation, how are we observing? From what level are we observing? Are we being drawn in by what we observe, or can we maintain a certain detachment concerning our observations? And well, these are hard to remember, but I'm just going to hope that we remember something. And so I'm making things a little bigger. I know I've been changing my methods. I didn't want to do too much of this enlarging. At least I'm not coloring things. But there's a chance of better memory if we Yeah, that word, creative weaving, is so indicative of the way the third ray works, and finally, a true comprehension of the time element, right timing. Had we thought that that is a psychic power to be cultivated? Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. Now, going on a little bit here, all these powers the disciple must eventually develop, but the process is necessarily slow. So, may I add that patience on the thorny path of occultism is really necessary. Perhaps realizing what can be accomplished, we find ourselves in a hurry. But the old saying is true about haste and waste. I've witnessed it many times in myself, and it usually ends up that a hasty action requires lengthy repair. So we just have to submit to the facts of the situation. To become, let's say, like one of the great ones, it's going to take lifetimes. And of course, becoming like that is not our principal motive. And finally, looks like we come upon mental polarization. Now, I wonder if he's going to distinguish between mental polarization and mental focus. Mental polarization is a very particular state of mind achieved, he tells us, when we are reading about the sixth initiation, mental polarization achieved between the second and third initiations, if we can symbolically and actually overcome the temptations that we encounter in the desert. After a period of baptism. Okay, so next, he says, comes the quality of mental polarization, and what exactly is this power or quality? Well, without it, I may add, he seems to tell us that we will be a hazard to the group process. Hazard, a chance of failure or of upsetting the goals, and only after we achieve mental polarization are we no longer considered a hazard by the watching teachers. Okay, so now he has some things to say. And how do we do this? Through the life of meditation, he says, at least we do it that way, and through the control of the astral body. Okay, that's how we achieve what he's calling mental polarization. I just kind of signaled that distinction. Which makes it possible for us to really begin to tread the Syrian path of initiation as transferred to Earth. And, hopefully that is what we are treading. Now, let's go on with Master Decay and see what he has to say about it. He says, increasingly must your inner life be lived upon the mental plane. Steadily and without dissent must the attitude of meditation be held. Not for a few minutes each morning or at specific moments throughout the day, but constantly, all day long. Well, is that expecting too much? Or how do we do that anyway? Watchful, observant, alive, keen, all of those requirements are part of living the life of meditation. The one who meditates is the observer, and the observer is eventually a very high being. So what else does he have to say about this mental polarization? It infers a constant orientation to life and the handling of life from the angle of the soul. Now we have to see how that might be misinterpreted. The handling of life from the angle of the soul. He goes on to say, this does not refer to what is so often referred to as, quote, turning one's back upon the world. I'll note that the beginning of that mantra, he who faces towards the light is blinded by its radiance. Well, I'll tell you what, if I'm going to forget it, I might as well forget it in the right way. And do it, do it correctly. He who faces towards the light am I missing something? Maybe it's just the word toward, perhaps. No? Well, then here's what I'll do. Blinded by its radiance. Now, why am I having trouble here? Maybe if this doesn't work, revolves upon the pedestal. Well, something's definitely wrong. I should be able to get that. Well, the word pedestal, at least, is there, yeah? Well, okay, found it immediately with the word pedestal. And what does he say? And I'll bring it in from Discipleship, Volume 2. He who, there's no word towards. He who faces the light and stands within its radiance is blinded to the issues of the world of men. See, this is all about turning one's back upon the world. Going on, he passes on the lighted way to the great center of absorption. May I say, it's the Pratyeka Buddhas that do this, and not the compassionate Buddhas. So he passes on the lighted way to the great center of absorption. But he who feels the urge to pass that way, yet loves his brother on the darkened path, revolves upon the pedestal of light and turns the other way. He faces towards the dark, and then the 7 points of light within himself transmit the outward streaming light. And lo, the face of those upon the darkened way receives that light. For them the way is not so dark. Behind the warriors, twixt the light and dark, blazes the light of hierarchy. That's a beautiful way of describing what we must do. And so therefore, we are not turning our back upon the world. So DK says, this does not refer to what is so often referred to as, quote, turning one's back upon the world. He goes on, the disciple faces the world, but he faces it from the level of the soul, looking clear-eyed upon the world of human affairs. Now, I'll add that clear-eyedness is very much the requirement of approaching the fourth initiation. It's not any kind of emotional approach or even strictly mental approach. It is an approach seen with clear eyes, and a great privilege it is, seen with clear eyes, even from the triadal point of view. So, repeating what Master DK has said, The disciple faces the world, but he faces it from the level of the soul. I'll ask, do we do that? Then going on from the level of the soul, looking clear-eyed upon the world of human affairs. And then a quotation, "In the world, yet not of the world, is the right attitude expressed for us by the Christ. Increasingly must the normal and powerful life of the emotional, astral, desire, and glamorous nature be controlled and rendered quiescent by the life of the soul functioning through the mind." Well, I'll keep that as a separate item, and we'll say that this is what the Christ demonstrated for us in the world, yet not of the world. Just pause for a moment, and we ask ourselves, have we achieved this attitude? Well, let us say if we don't really identify with the lesser vibrations, then we can be functioning within these lesser vibrations. But we know that our true home, our true point of awareness is not what the lesser vibrations would offer us. So increasingly, he says, must the normal and powerful life of the emotional, astral, desire, and glamorous nature be controlled and rendered quiescent by the life of the soul, functioning through the mind. And I'll add that this can be called the mind held steady in the light. Going on with DK, the emotions which are normally self-centered and personal must be transmuted into the realizations of universality and impersonality. And I'll ask, wouldn't that be coming from the Buddhic plane, particularly, and its effect upon the emotional body? Especially, these realizations of universality, and the spiritual triad is, shall we say, an impersonal realm. It registers as would register, at least in part, the mind, the emotions, the spiritual will of the planetary logos. It's a triple mechanism for our own monad, which is part and parcel of the presence of the planetary logos. So repeating here what DK said, the emotions, which are normally self-centered and personal, must be transmuted into the realizations of universality and impersonality. Now, again, with universality, it's definitely what Buddhi gives to the emotional body. And impersonality is that high vantage point, seeing the personality as an aspect of a much larger sphere, that of the planetary logos at least. Going on with DK, the astral body must become the organ through which the love of the soul can pour. And I'll just say, easily said, but not easily easily achieved. The question will come up, do you truly love your fellow human beings constantly or occasionally, cyclically, or when? And if the text goes on, desire must give place to aspiration, and that, in its turn, must be merged in the group life and the group good. Let us note, our aspiration is not for ourselves, but somehow for the greater good of whatever group it is in which we are working, the smaller groups, the communities, the nation, the groupings of nations, the so-called blocks of nations within the international accumulation of nations, and finally all of humanity. And going on with DK, glamour must give place to reality, and the pure light of the mind must pour into all the dark places of the lower nature. May I say, we oftentimes just don't want to face what's really there. I've had so much experience with seeing people do that, evade facing what's really there. I've done it myself, of course. I guess we all have. So, these are the requirements. These are the, goodness, this is a book filled with the requirements of discipleship. For us who will be in the world and not of the world, that is the right attitude, and we are learning to love and learning to transmute the normally resistant astral body, glamour-inducing astral body, into something much wider and better. Okay, now going on a little bit here. These are the results of mental polarization. Now, is he saying, because the only truly mentally polarized person in an earlier definition is the initiate of the second degree, but I guess we can strive towards that, even if we, like so many, are initiates of the first probationary initiation, the first degree. So going back, repeating what he says, these are the results of mental polarization and are brought about by definite meditation and the cultivation of the meditative attitude. May I add, as he says, it's not just sitting down in the morning or maybe at a few times a day. It's a way of regarding the world. The meditative attitude. He goes on to say, this is not new information for you, but it is something which as yet remains unexpressed practically. So here DK is facing us again with a practical realization. We're not there yet. We're not doing it. And when we're faced with his analysis, then we have a choice. Some people who were thin-skinned, as he defined the term, reactive and wanting to hang on to their what's called personality tradition, they went away. Others rose to the occasion. Not so many by the time it was all over. I think it all started out with 50 or 51 students who had been gathered in, and for one reason or another, I think 8 remained. Doesn't seem like a very impressive record, but remember, these people were just getting the seed group process started, and the process of other specialized groups, and perhaps by the year 2200, that 275-year process will see a much more positive fruition. So now he's going on to a point where we may pause. If you will ask yourselves the following questions, and here he goes, courageously and truthfully make reply before the bar of your own soul, that being before the let's say the bench of judgment. It's how he uses the word, where the soul sits as the adjudicator. Courageously and truthfully, he asks, make reply before the bar of your own soul. You will learn much and greatly aid your development. Now, friends, it is my deep hope that the few technical things that are going on with my computer at the moment are not lethal, meaning that I, sadder but perhaps no wiser, would have to do this whole program over again. I wouldn't like to think that that is what will happen, but I'll find out pretty soon. And then we'll look at what he's asking us, and realizing that the disciples he had gathered around him basically had to answer these questions. Maybe we'll want to take a little time to try to answer them ourselves before the bar of our own soul. When I look at how long it's been since I have been here, I wish it had been more frequent. But we've worked through 4 pages, and we realized that the kind of pondering required from this material is really quite extraordinary, and how one reading is never enough. That I have firmly realized with my 50 years experience in reading these books and trying how I might to apply what I've learned. Always inadequately, of course, but trying at least to apply. So if later this evening I'm able to go on, we'll see. It will still be the same day. It will be the 10th of August. And meanwhile, I will, with high hopes, start all this going and try to figure out why the lady with a very pleasant voice, who is recorded on Zoom, is no longer talking to me. I don't quite know why that might be the case, but I will look into it. Okay, friends, love and many blessings from Tuya and myself and the whole team. Of Michael Crow and Joe Waltz and B.L. Allison and Michael Stacy and the others that help us on a periodical basis. We'll be returning. Bye for now.